Hello, and welcome to another productivity talk from the APO Secretariat in Tokyo, Japan. I am Tanvir from the Agriculture Division. As you know, the COVID-19 lockdowns in Asia have broken the efficient last-mile delivery of agri-food supply chains to customers with the shutdown of food stalls, street markets, and wholesale markets. As a result of COVID-19, there are more push factors for small-scale farmers to understand and participate in food value chains, rather than simply growing crops and giving post-harvest and distribution functions to other stakeholders. Connecting to food supply chains in the right way can give farmers a better chance of survival in the post-pandemic environment. In this productivity talk, we are joined by Mr. Kit Chan, Managing Director, K-Farm Private Limited, Malaysia, to talk about small-scale farmers, financing and managing production in the new normal market environment to survive post-COVID-19. Kit Chan's business is fresh fruit export from Malaysia, and he is involved in the Nexus project of the Malaysia Productivity Corporation, MPC. Please feel free to post your questions to Kit Chan in the chat box, and we will try to answer them during the Q&A session. Please don't forget to add your name and country. Kit Chan, thank you for your time today. Now over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tanvir, for your kind introductions. And thank you to the APO for inviting me to share my ideas and my thoughts in this productivity talk sessions. I hope I could be of some comfort and of some value to the audience this afternoon, because at times like these, and these are times that we have not gone through for many of us in our lives, these are very testing times, difficult for some people, and it is not easy to dwell into issues that people are even at this moment currently experiencing difficult moments. So I hope that our conversation this afternoon could bring some comfort and perhaps some useful ideas to the audience who could utilize some of these things that we talk about this afternoon. So I'd like to move on to some prepared slides that I have prepared on perhaps how farmers could survive in these post-COVID-19 periods. You may wonder why I start by talking about a double whammy, because in a double whammy, you actually get hit on the left-hand side of your cheek and then multiplied with the right-hand side of your cheek. We start by saying that farmers lost their market due to the lockdown, and as a result of which their crops went down to the dump yard, and so did their income. Now, this is not something that was intended by any party. It's just that in order to deal with a medical public health issue, social distancing has to be implemented. Perhaps on hindsight, we may think that this may not need to be done. But there again, hindsight has always been the wisest person. So we are not going to look into those issues. But on the other hand, we have situations like these. And this is where, if you're a farmer, and to realize that your crop could not be sold, but you have to still uproot it and then throw it on some places in your dump yards or in the farm. And it really is a very heartbreaking sight and experience for those people involved in it. And I feel very, very sad looking at pictures like these. And what happens with the other side of the whammy? Well, the post-COVID-19 would recover, but will these farmers find their clients again? And that is an issue, because when you are in business, losing a client out of a situation, when the situation improves, you may not find them. And also, what happens when everybody is talking about the new normal? I tell you that there are three words I keep hearing throughout this last 3-4 months of the lockdown and the pandemic. The first, of course, is COVID-19. Now we are all an expert in virus. The second one is lockdown, which is a word everybody hated. The third word, which is so often spoken, is the word new normal. Now, we use it now on our daily conversation, but what does the new normal really emphasize? It does say that our lives today are going to be like this. And that is a very frightening thought. Now, let's talk about the customers in the new normal. What will the new normal entail for the customer? I can tell you this: food hygiene. They are going to be very, very conscious about food hygiene. They are conscious about food safety. They want to talk about it all the time, because even though it has no relation with the pandemic, but because of the lockdown, because of the health issue, food hygiene, food safety, and food traceability will come into play very much. Food traceability is knowing who grew the food, where does it come from, and do you have trust in the food that you are consuming? Because, I mean, personally, my experience is I find no joy in going to the restaurant now, because you cannot be meeting and talking to people, in the restaurants who are close by, because of this kind of new normal situations. So as we understand all of these problems, many of us feel that the government is not listening to us, but that is not true. The government and the authorities are, of course, they are trying to help. But the point remains, how much can they do? Who would they help? Would they be only looking after the big companies that are too big to fail? Perhaps not. Even though big companies are indeed very important and they cannot fail, because if they do, a lot of subsidiary companies will be affected. And what about looking after the small farmers? And goodness, there are millions and millions of small farmers in Asia, all over the world, that needs help. So where do you start in moving in from this situation, and what can the government try to do?
Their crops to the dump yard and their income along with it. How do you think they could come back from this experience? You also mentioned the role of government authorities in bailing out small-scale farmers. Could you add some further comments on this point?
Well, I dare say that small farmers will have a fighting chance. But one thing is for sure, they cannot do business as usual. Like, well, I've been a farmer all these years, so I know what to do. No, they can't. They have to stop thinking like that. And they must now make all the necessary changes. They must make all the necessary adaptations and innovation that they have postponed for so long. Well, I am aware that governments would love to bail out all of the small farms, but can they do it? Are they able to? Also, the consequence of, you may be able to do it on the short term, but would there be any repercussions in the economics in the medium term? Which is why I want to bring on to the next slide here on my 3 approaches in how to go through this period in surviving the post-COVID-19. I've got 3 points here I want to share with you. The first is the need for financial cash flow as seed money. And number 2, trying to find alternative markets and buyers, because you may be a good farmer, but you will need alternative markets now, because if you are going to survive in the post-COVID-19, you need to be more innovative of how you do things. And my third proposition in approach is that all farmers must now progress both in the way they think as well as in the things that they do in their farms, to move away from the thinking of a supply chain to value chain. So what do I think about the cash flow? Now, it's very often that giving money to farmers is one thing, but farmers need more than just money. They need to restart their business simply by carrying on with a new season of crops. So when authorities do provide financial assistance at times like these, which I know quite a few countries are actually doing this, they need to be thinking very carefully. If they are dispensing cash to these farmers, what will the farmers be doing with it? Is it to pay off their debts, or is it to replant another crop? So these are very, very important issues. Now, the thing about giving seed money is they must come along with low interest loans, because if not, then it is not going to be of any value to these farmers. And if they have to pay back the returns with high interest rates, that's not possible. I have thought also about another way of assisting small farmers. Over the years, and all through the the agriculture revolution that we have been experiencing in so many years, so many decades actually, I tend to say that the people who have benefited most in this revolution, in this development, are the people who provided the inputs to a production. In this case, I have people who produce pesticides, fertilizers, soil implements, and all of these people, they have had their businesses bloomed and they grew into huge conglomerates. I think this is a time where these very large companies can now come on back into looking at small farmers and what they could do to help these small farmers. I think for a start, they can help by providing them with slightly longer credit terms. I think that is the least I think we can ask of from these companies. And I'm sure there's so many other ideas that they can come up with themselves. A third point where we can provide assistance to farmers is through the enabling of agri-food processing assistance, whereby authorities or maybe organizations can help to extend the life of the products of these very perishable goods for the farmers. So there's a lot of activities where the authorities and all of these organizations, they can come up to help with.
And you talked about the growing importance of food hygiene, safety, and traceability. How is the way of doing these things different in the new normal post-COVID-19 situation?
Well, to be honest, the ideas of food hygiene, food safety, and traceability, it has always been the same. I remember at the APO that I have participated in some of the work here, we were talking on the same issues of food hygiene, traceability all these years. So what's so different about the post-COVID new normal situation? Nothing, except that now farmers and everybody handling the food products are under more scrutiny. By who? The customer. Because the whole pandemic has affected the psyche of customers, that now they are looking at their health with a lot more sensitivity than before. And seriously now, and it's a simple truth is, if you don't pay attention to these hygiene and safety issues, it will be very difficult for you to play in the mainstream markets. Which takes me to my following slides about finding alternative markets and buyers. You know, at the very start of the pandemic, there was a big surge into online marketing and food distribution, and many farmers were able to sell their products online as a result of which. Now, I I can support this kind of marketing avenue. However, there are certain issues that come very quickly to my mind. Firstly, technology ability and the capacity of farmers to undertake these kind of marketing approaches. A second thought comes in as, can the production threshold support a regular and substantiable or sustainable business, and whether there would be a sufficient a range of products for the clients. So I'm not trying to push cold water into this, but I think to jump into this very quickly, I think it's going to solve all our problems. We may have to take a step back and re-examine this. There's this other point that I wrote here. All farmers must now take up responsibilities to play in the mainstream market. Well, this is very difficult. If you look at the sentence itself, it is really obvious to an extent that, you know, it's a very silly thing for Kitchan to have to even say it publicly. Of course, every farmer wants to play in the mainstream market. Who would not? Well, my next question would be, if that's what you want, how would you do it? It comes back to my same point again. Quality product, safe food product, how you plant, how you grow, how you took care of your crop. What were the necessary applications of cultivation practice, good agriculture practices, good harvesting techniques, good post-harvesting handling treatment. Unless you have done all of these things, you are not complying to the value that you are going to give to the farmer, to the consumers. So that is why I'm saying you should not take it for granted. Just because you are a farmer, the market is there waiting for you. No. The market would be available to you provided you take up these responsibilities, and you got to do it now. I think we have postponed this issue for far too long. An option to finding new markets and buyers for very small farmers is that you have to come together. You got to work together and work as a team. I mean, the story of, you know, a single bamboo has got enough strength, but you put a bunch of bamboos, tie them together, you become a very strong entity. At the MPC, this is the National Productivity Organization in Malaysia, the MPC, which I'm spending some of my time in this organization. We came out with a project, and I remember we titled this project for the cluster, we call it Creating a Movement for Robust Contract Farm. Now, you may find this as a very strange title for a project, but let me explain why. Here we are saying that we are trying to create a movement. Well, I dare say that, you know, for most people, if they have their own farm, they always want to work on their own because they have pride, they have confidence in themselves, and they think that working with another farmer would be too distracting for them. I think that might have some value in it. You know, it drives your own personal endeavor, which is good. But I think if we are able to create a kind of a movement and thinking about cluster farms, there are a lot of value that we can get out of this. We use the word robust to indicate that there is a continuous drive impetus in the implementation. It is not something that we just do it for a short period and then forget about it and then expect things to go on. It won't work like that. So at the MPC, we are continuously driving the work on trying to get the cluster farms moving, getting farmers to come into clusters. A third point, which is very important in this contract farming, cluster farm project, is we work towards improving the negotiation position of the farmers. Very often when we talk about cluster farms, the farmers would say, oh, very good. Now that we're a cluster, the prices of our products is going to increase. Well, that's objective, of course, but there's no automatic taken for granted assumption on this. As a cluster, your biggest advantage and your strength is that you are now in a position to negotiate on the upper hand. Either it's from purchasing of inputs for the farms, fertilizers, pesticides, or whatever you need. At the same time, you have the negotiation positions, upward position, hopefully, with your buyers. That now you are in a better position to negotiate the terms that is going to be favorable to you. That is a very important point for all clusters. Of course, the transfer of technology need not be emphasized further, that it is a lot easier to be implemented. And in our cluster farm projects at the MPC, we focus a lot on commercial connectivity, such that each of these clusters, they are not left on their own to deal with the circumstances, but that we try to connect them into the market sphere. We try to introduce people to them that they would learn to start talking and negotiating. Something else we did in the project, which is not often seen, is we developed guidelines for these cluster farms to draw contracts, because our experience told us that, farmers are not very good at writing contracts, or they are always very afraid of putting their signature at the bottom of many pages of conditions. So that's one of the jobs that we have undertaken in the MPC.
So, Kitchen, how has K-Farm developed its value chain?
Well, I must say that I've been working on developing the value chain for K-Farm since day one of the company. And the way we work in this company is that we continuously develop the transparency of what we do with our clients, that they fully understand why we do it, and what we try to do to improve the business advantage for both parties. That's the important thing. And now I'd like to share with you some of the other things that we do at MPC on developing the value chain. The customer is king. Well, that's a very big claim to make. The customer is king. But I to it because we look at this picture. It's a little girl. Actually, this is a picture I took. And, my wife and I, we were traveling in Taipei a year back, and I was just so intrigued watching this girl making a decision, trying to decide which of these candy sweets that she would buy. Now, we know that each of these candy tastes the same, has the same ingredient and everything else, but the final decision lies onto this little girl to decide which one that she would have. So if you are the candy manufacturer, you produce these candies, you don't just have to say that your candy tastes the best, because that's not good enough. You need to prove it to this little girl that your candy will attract her attention, that she would select your candy and not the others. Which brings me to my next point of saying, delivering quality food from farm to diners. We have for a long time heard of this maxim saying that delivering food from farm to table or farm to fork. Well, I take that maxim a little bit further by saying, instead of the table, we take it to the diner, because the diner is a very dynamic decision-making entity. If the diner can produce a good dinner, he or she will be happy. If the dinner is not good, then perhaps it may not be because the diner person did not cook well. It could be because of the quality of the product. So I think if we start to think of changing the maxim from delivering food from farm to diner, it would remind us very much of who the king is. And that is really the consumer. I'd like to share with you in the next few slides some of the initiatives, actions, activities, projects that we have done at MPC under the project of Agri-Food Productivity Nexus. And some of these programs, I put examples here of the cluster farms as well as the AgriLink information toolbox. I will explain that a little bit further. I'd like to take us a little bit back into developing the rationale for the work we do at MPC on the Agri-Food Productivity Nexus project. We understood that the upstream, where the farm level is, the production level is, there has been a constant frustration of the lack of information in such that farmers would not know what to grow, when to grow, how to grow, and why they grow a particular product for the market, simply because they don't know what the market is. And to many, many farmers, these small farmers particularly, they have no access to information. And whatever they know, whatever they can hear of, it's due to the maybe information said by word of mouth from the neighbors, from the traders that do business with them. But can those information be trusted? That's another problem. We have another issue where at the consumption level, the retailers, the consumers, the end of the chain entities, they are frustrated because they don't know what happened, who grew it, and how did that product come along the supply chain. The whole food traceability connectivity was not complete, and they don't have the right picture to what has happened. And this has given rise, the lack of access to information, it created the white spaces. Now, what are the white spaces? That is the area between the upstream and the downstream, whereby there's this emptiness where information was not going through this whole value chain. Farmers don't understand the markets don't know about the production process. And as a result of this white space, people can take advantage of this lack of information flow. And I mean, we hear too much of cases of middlemen in the supply chain being the bad people. Well, I'm not going to say that middlemen are bad people. That's never in my mind. Middlemen perform a very important function, but because of the white spaces, it allows them to take advantage of this situation. And that's my point here. And this is the kind of mismatch that really holds back a lot of development objectives in many countries. And these are experiences that I've gone through in many of the places that I have gone through in the last many few years. Which is where we came to this model. And this model is supposedly to answer all of the problems of the previous slide. This Nexus Information Toolbox is supposed to connect between the upstream and the downstream to provide access. I'm not saying to provide information, but it is to provide access to the information that the users need. The users could be farmers, users could be retailers from either upstream, downstream, or any of the intermediaries. Anybody can use this information to extract information that they need to improve their business. Resource people can also put in information that they want to share with the value chain. So there is a flow between the top and those names, UPM, TAR, UC, these are institutions in Malaysia. And we're hoping that they will contribute to some of the resource information into this Nexus Information Toolbox. And the users would be entities, stakeholders in the value chain. So this is what it's going to be in a couple of months from now, because we are now working on this AgroLink, and it's supposed to provide all of the answers, hopefully, to the problems of this inability to access information. So AgroLink, that is going to be a name that you will be hearing a lot. And I'm also very grateful that the Director General of MPC, our Dato' Latif, he is amazing, because he has given his full-fledged support on our team in developing this AgroLink, and we are all very grateful for this kind of encouragement. So thank you very much, Dr. Latif, if you are listening. I have a take-home message, and this is what it says. When the hurricane is blowing overhead, lie low. When it has blown away, stand up and start another day. Well, this was first said to me when I was a child by my mother. I went through some difficult times, and that's where a hurricane is all about. And instead of saying, darling, I love you, my mother would say, she did not say that. She said, well, don't worry, son, when the hurricane blows away, well, get up and start another day, So it's a kind of things that all mothers or fathers would very much encouraging to say to their children. And I would very much like to say this to my friends, not as somebody, a father or mother, but as a friend. Do not be discouraged, because this hurricane will blow away. And what we need to do is just stand up and start another day. But do not forget to innovate, because it is through the innovation that you can survive in your business, and there is no option B. So thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, for listening the last few minutes. And I would like to take some questions, if there are, from the audience. I'm sorry, I lost your voice. I'm not getting any sound.
Can you hear now?
Yes, very good.
So thank you. So thank you very much for also explaining how K-Farm has created a movement for robust contract farming. It was interesting to hear about MPC's AgroLink platform. So before we proceed with the questions from our viewers, I would like to ask you a few questions based on your presentation. So Kitchen, in your take-home message, you mentioned that if the farmers were to innovate their business, they could survive. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, yes, certainly. Very often when we run a business, we are always very afraid to change, which is something inherent in a lot of our nature. So, sometimes you go to a lot of companies and you see that, in the last 25 years, the office, the pack house, the farm, everything else seemed to be like it was 25 years ago when they first started the business. Because I suppose that's how a lot of people think that, well, we've got a good business running, we've got a good formula, why change a good, profitable formula? That has always been the way of thinking for many successful people. But I keep saying that, no, that is not quite a logical way, because, we have to innovate, we have to evolve, we have to change. And, as organisms, we have to adapt to everyday situations. We have to adapt to new changes, without which we will not survive. I mean, look through biology, look through history. And I think, I need not say further that change is a constant. Sorry, that's a philosophical point, but it is true. So when I did say earlier on that we have to innovate in the business, I am hoping to encourage my dear friends that do not be afraid to change. And you can. Don't worry about the technology. It is available. You can do it. That's my
Yeah,
point.
thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. So as you know, before COVID-19, it was already difficult for small-scale farmers to find new markets or buyers. Why did you suggest that it is actually easier for them to find these potential markets?
Well, I think you have asked the wrong question, Tanvir. It is not going to be easier to find new markets now in the COVID-19. In fact, it will be even harder. And that's the point. It has always been difficult to find markets, to find new buyers. More so now with the post-COVID and with some of the criteria I mentioned earlier, it's going to be even more difficult. So again, it is a point made. I'm not giving you a solution that, if you do A, B, C, D, you're going to solve all that problem. No, I'm saying that A, B, C, D is what you need to do to be on board to solving this problem. And it's a real problem, looking for new customers. But if you were to have done the basic of these requirements, you are in the game to play to win. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kitchen. Nice explanation. So we are now joined by Sarah, a current APO intern from the University of Tokyo's Graduate School of Public Policy, to ask a few questions posted in the live chat box from some of our viewers. Sarah, what do the viewers want to ask Kitchen?
Mr. Kichan, we've received a question from Dr. Mohammed Saeed, a former agriculture director at the APO from Pakistan. Dr. Saeed's question is, how can we motivate farmers to build their capacity and enable them to do farming and agribusiness according to the new normal?
Well, it's good to hear from Dr. Saeed, a very dear friend of mine. Well, Dr. Said, I'm sure we have this conversation before in the many years that we have met. What was it, 14, 15 years? That's a very long time. Now, to answer the question, do we want to encourage people to go into farming when we ourselves who are in this area are going through such difficult times? Should we not want them to become a doctor, perhaps? It's so easy. Or maybe an engineer or a lawyer, which is easier. I would say when we want to encourage and we want to bring on board people to the agriculture, it is simply because they do have a calling to wanting to do agriculture. My calling was I wanted to make the world a better place. And what can I do through it is produce food that is of value to people who would consume it, to sell the fruit that people would appreciate it. That was my calling. So I think if they have the same calling, it would be interesting. But how do we do it? This is where authorities, the enablers, people like ourselves, part of me working with the MPC, this is where we project ourselves as enablers, not that we have the solution to all of the problems and questions, but that we are able to develop environments that would be of value, of benefit to people who want to come on board. That's why we call ourselves enablers. And what we do is we build enabling environments for people to come on board to play this game. So there are lots of approaches to doing this. And I'm not going to say which of these approaches is better than the other. Because in each country, the situation, environment of politics, economics, and social are different. And in that sense, we need to be very much in touch with the people on the ground to understand what exactly they need and then provide them with a lot of communication without a question. Always listen to these people on the ground, what they need, and then we think of what's the best way, simplest, cheapest, fastest, and easiest way. to provide these enablers. So, Dr. Syed, I hope I could be of some help in answering these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another question comes from Rafael Hig from Bangladesh. So in Bangladesh, the small-scale farmers are facing difficulties reaching the market due to the lockdown condition, as you've spoken about in your presentation. Even when they are throwing away their products, they are not getting the prices that they need. How do you think they can incorporate these hygiene issues?
Well, I'm sure this question of hygiene is something that we all know what we need to do. And I think we do know what to do when it comes to the hygiene. But we still have problems with it, even in my country. You need to have the political will. I think that is important. You know, it's easy for NGOs to come around. It's easy for people, you know, the skeptic to come around and say, "Oh, this is so dirty. You know, why can't we have our wet markets being cleaner? You know, look at Japan. You know, they can do it so well. Why can't we do that?" You know, I hear these things all the time. But the only answer that comes back to me again and again is, well, hell, let's just do it. Let's gain that political will and push it and drive it. And, you know, there's so many things we can do to get people on board, to get their markets, you know, clean up. It's easily done if we have that will. We need leaders. So, Mr. Raphael, I think, you know, the fact that you have raised these questions, I assume that you have thought about this problem a fair bit, and that you would become that leader in your community to drive a project to clean up and to raise the hygiene standards and level in your country. As far as the market and the dumping of that food is concerned, it is a real pain. I can feel it as you say it, that, you know, they dump their crops, you know, because nobody wants it, or they couldn't sell it through the channels. But there will come a time where the swings of this COVID-19, the production cycles, there will be in a couple of months' time from now, where those farmers who are not producing their goods, they will become a shortage. And I have a feeling, Raphael, that in a couple of months' time, you will be saying that there will be a shortage of a certain product in your country. Because these are cycles. Rather than looking at it with a very gloomy, negative approach, take a look at this as though it's a cycle. And if you do it correctly, you can offset it, take advantage for the benefit of everyone. That's how I would like to envisage your question, Mr. Raphael. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Another question comes from Mr. Ishwan in Indonesia. What are your suggestions about farming with strict health protocol to overcome COVID-19? We have to avoid unnecessary spending to maintain farming to survive in the market.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure about the questions. Is to spend less in order to survive? Is that the question, Sarah?
So should small-scale farmers, in order to overcome the current situation, how can they balance unnecessary spending with also the strict health protocols that they are forced under?
Okay, so Mr. Isram is trying to relate between spending and necessary spending in getting the farm food safety, for example, food hygiene, for example, certifications. Well, let me tell you that any spending on hygiene, any spending on food safety, and any spending on the quality of the food, it is not unnecessary spending. It is the most important expenditure. I'm sorry, I have to agree with you on this point. Neither am I saying that you should spend a lot of money on it. I'm saying that as a farmer, the farmer will certainly know what he needs to do and what he does not need to do. Ask any, self-respecting farmer. He will tell you, I will have to do this if I want my crop to be like such and such. And they can tell you correctly. So we must not presume that the farmers don't know what they're doing. And that is a very wrong presumption. Every farmer knows what he is doing. The question is whether he's doing it correctly, scientifically or not. That's debatable. But the question is, if he bears in his mind that he wants his crop to be safe, cleaned, he can track down everything he has said he has done for the crop, he has done it correctly. And that's exactly what good agriculture practices conceptions are all about. That he's conscious of doing the work, producing the food. So it is not a question of how much he spends. Will he be able to afford a certification of Global Gap, for example? Because my understanding is that Global Gap certification today would take, quite maybe $1,000 to get a certification done, which may be beyond his affordability. I'm not talking of that. I'm talking of if his fruit cannot go into the Global Gap certifications, try the IndoGap, Indonesian Good Agriculture Practice. That doesn't cost a lot of money. Start with that, which doesn't cost a lot of money, get the certifications, and then move on further on. So these are very natural ways that all farmers do understand. So we have to be very careful not to misinterpret the situation at the ground level. And the way to do it is we have to talk to these farmers all the time.
So
I hope I'll give you some inspiration.
Thank you, Kitchen, for your explanation. I have one question to you. As you mentioned that the customer is king, and in Japan it said the customer is God. Do you think these ways of thinking demonstrate the importance of the customer?
Well, in many countries through history, the king, the role of the king and the role of God sometimes come together, and you don't know which is which. So I don't want to debate whether the customer is king or customer is God, but I can know one thing, that they are equally very, very important. And as king and as God, we have to respect them. Even for a person like myself, we have to respect the customer as we respect God, as we respect the king. That is one part. The second part is, how do you do it? It's not just say that, oh, I give my customers the full satisfaction of his purchase of my fruit. It's nice to say, but you need to prove it. How do you prove it? Well, you can write a story about how you do your farming practice. I mean, if the customer buys it, fine. But to prove it, you need certifications. It means that you need an independent auditor who have no interest in your business to come to your farm, to your practice, to your business, and go through the whole rigmarole of how you conduct your business and your production system, everything else, and to say that you have done it correctly, safely, okay? And when he writes his report, he says, Mr. Kit Chan has done the necessary actions such that I can now confidently say that his product has a quality that would satisfy the customer. Now, having done that, you can be very sure that your customer should find solace, should find comfort, and find confidence in your product. And this is where customer is king, customer is God, whatever it is, that you show them that your value in that product that they purchase is authenticated, not by yourself, but by somebody else who is credible to do the job. That's my point when I say customer is king. Tanvir?
Yeah, thank you very much. So how does actually MPC work in developing the value chain for small scale farmers in Malaysia?
Well, it's a lot of things that we do at MPC. I mean, I have worked for the APO for quite a few years now, Mr. Tanvir, as you probably know very much of myself here. And you have sent me to many countries through the member countries of the APO. And all through these experiences, I have seen a lot of situations in these countries. But coming back to Malaysia, and it's one of those rare times that I actually did work for MPC here in Malaysia, I realized that here at the MPC, they understand the polarity of the private sector, the private enterprises. They understand the polarity of governments and the regulatory agencies on the other. And the MPC, through the project of Agri-Food Productivity Nexus, they try to bridge the two polarities to come to each other. And that is something which I find great interest and excitement, that they have actually looked at this issue. Because too often, if you just go into the industry, you would hear people complaining about the government. Oh, my government is hopeless. They don't do anything for us. They don't care about us. They're hopeless. That's what you always hear. When you go to the other side, you hear the government officials saying, oh, it's so difficult to work at our farmers. Our farmers are the most difficult people in the whole world. The Japanese farmers are easier to work with. The Koreans are better to work with. So you can go on and on into this kind of situation, but it is not solving the problem. Neither are these comments correct. The farmers are really doing what they thought was the right thing to do. The government and the authorities are also doing what they believe is the right thing to do. They are both correct. The trick is, how do you bring the two polarities together? And that is the work that we are doing at MPC under the project. And this is where I find myself, working in a team, and my teammates at AFPN, they are incredible. They are government people, but the way they think is, they amaze me. They think like, private business-minded people, and that's very refreshing. And this is where, Tanvir, that the MPC, and I'm boasting about them because it's a Malaysian product, so I'm advertising. But I'm very confident that this is the way when we can talk confidently of the PPP, public-private partnership, and this is what it means. Tanvir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I have another question. Sarah, can you ask?
So thank you so much for your response, Kichan. We've received a question from Mr. Morimoto from Japan. And the question is, what do you think about the accuracy of information to ensure food value chains that you mentioned?
Accuracy of food value chain. I do not understand the term. However, I would define it as accuracy of food value chain. Okay, say for example,
Kichan, sorry, accuracy of information to ensure food value chain. Information.
The information. Well, that's going to be a big problem, because right now information, we just overloaded with information on a daily basis. Okay, so the accuracy of this kind of information is there's no one way that you can prove it, and you can't go through a process of proving it. I think it would be like this. If I live in a community in some place in Malaysia, say a smaller town, not Kuala Lumpur, but a smaller town in Malaysia, I would probably buy food that is local, because I probably understand where that product come from a neighbor who grows that banana, or from another neighbor down the road who grows the papaya. And knowing them, I would purchase my product from them. But if I have a pineapple coming all the way from Philippines, I don't know the farmer from Philippines. The only way I can judge is that if that product of pineapple from Philippines has got a tag that says the farmer grew this product via good agriculture practice, then I would be a lot more assured that that product, I would have more confidence in that product than otherwise. I mean, you know, if you show me a string of awards of being the best farmer in Philippines, you know, growing pineapples, well, that might be interesting to know, but it won't give me the kind of confidence. So having said that, Mr. Marimoto, it comes to me that the certification is a very important aspect of authenticating the quality of your product, i.e. the kind of information you put along with your product, which means that it goes along with the value of your product. It is a lot more than just advertising that, you know, Kit Chan grows the best pineapple in the world. It also says something about certification agencies. Why do we trust the Global Gap as an authentic certification scheme? Well, they really have to prove themselves correct, because if at any time we suspect that these certification bodies are not doing their job correctly, it's just going to go haywire. The trust on these certificates will just go out the window, and that's it. The whole problem, the whole chain will be wiped out, which is why it is so important that the value, the trustworthiness of certification bodies, the way they conduct the business, it's not like, you know, you do it right and wrong. There's no such thing as a right and wrong way of growing a pineapple. There's only a good way, or it is not a good way. That is the kind of information we need to project to the customers. Because let's face it, you know, nobody's going to die just because we use pesticides to kill off the pests in the fields. But how we use it, that is the important point.
Yeah, thank you, Kit Chan. Yeah, I got your message. So thank you to all the viewers for joining this APO Productivity Talk. Unfortunately, this session has come to an end. Kit Chan, thank you for joining us and sharing your insights. Thank you, viewers, for posting your questions. Due to time limitations, we could not get around to sharing your questions with Kit Chan. However, we will keep the chat box open for 2 weeks, and we will answer your questions after consultation with Kit Chan. We look forward to seeing you online at other forthcoming APO Productivity Talks. Thank you, and see you again.